Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. As a reminder, please note that board meetings are being recorded for the convenience of those unable to attend this video conference. Recording and closed captioning will be posted to the BERS YouTube channel following the meeting. Alex, would you please call roll?
Larry and Angelo.
Larry, you're muted.
I can see you there, but I cannot hear you, Larian.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Isaac Armignani.
Present.
Thank you. Janelle Chacon. April Chapman. Deborah Dillingham.
Present.
Natalie Green Giles.
Present.
Thank you. Eric Henry.
Present.
Thank you. Michael Kraft.
Present.
Vanessa Leong. Gary Linnon. John Maderick.
Present.
Donald Nesbitt. Russell Buckley.
Present for Lindsay Oates.
Kathy Park Price.
Present.
Thank you. Laurie Podvesker. Thomas Shepard.
Present.
Thank you. Jacqueline Tacarante.
Present.
Thank you. Shannon Waite.
Present.
Thank you.
Right, we have a quorum. Thank you all. The first order of business is calendar item number 1, noting the minutes of the meeting. What was that? Sorry.
Lindsay's here.
Excellent.
Hi.
Okay.
Russ is going to read for me today because I may not be able to stay on for the whole time. I have a town hall I have to attend tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. First order of business is calendar item number 1, noting the minutes of the meetings of the Board of Retirement held on April 29th, 2021 and May 6th, 2021. Is that audio a little better?
I think the
I'll
volume is a
dial in
little
after we get
low.
the first vote going once Sandy starts as executive director. The meeting minutes have been previously posted to the board via email on the SharePoint site. We have a motion to consider the minutes from the April 29th board meeting.
Motion, Isaac.
From Natalie, second from Shannon. Just looking at the video and seeing them as I calling it as I see it. As usual, we're going to do voice votes. When I call out all in favor, if you wish to vote in favor of the resolution, please unmute yourself and respond in favor. Similarly, if you wish to oppose or abstain from a particular vote, please unmute yourself and respond accordingly when I call out any opposed or any abstentions. All those in favor of approving the minutes for the April 29th board meeting, please indicate your approval. Aye.
Approved.
Aye.
Aye.
Isaac, aye.
In favor.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The
Abstain.
motion. Thank you. The motion carries. May I have a motion to consider the minutes from the May 6th board meeting?
Motion, Deb.
Thank you, Deb. Second, Michael. All in favor of approving the minutes from the May 6th board meeting, please indicate your approval. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstain.
I abstain.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next on the agenda is the executive director's update. Sandy, would you like to share any remarks with us?
Yes, I would, Russ. Thank you very much. Want to officially welcome Nicholas Soto as your alternate member, elected trustee from Local 891. Nicholas, welcome. Some pieces of information for the calendar. KKR, one of our strongest private equity relationships across the city, is offering a virtual trustee educational session on June 7th at 10 a.m. Karen Wong can assist with registration. You should have seen an email come around a day or so ago, but anyone who'd like to attend, we can arrange that. The Coriad Global Summit Trustee Educational Conference scheduled for July 14th to 16th. I encourage you to consider attending this conference. We have a number of trustees already registered. If you would like to attend, Karen Wong can help you. Our investment strategy staff and our consultants have been busy. Working with Lennox Part Solutions, they're presenting surveys to our investment managers in order to document their diversity and inclusion. I'll remind you that you approved Lennox Park as our contractor a number of months ago. In addition, the Bureau of Asset Management has responded to our request for additional transparency around our investment management contracts and site agreements. We hope this improves administration of these agreements and avoids the need for last-minute requests for trustee approvals. I don't think any of us were particularly happy about what we had to do to have a special meeting. Investment strategies, and Siegel Marco will be reviewing our investment policy statement to determine if we can build more clarity into this document to assist with that also. Finally, tonight, well, not finally, but finally for investment strategy, you're going to hear a presentation from Siegel Marco on an asset liability study that we have been working on. This is a very important analytical tool which we will be updating annually, and I believe it's a first for our system and perhaps not for the city, but for our system. For return to office plans, people are familiar with the DOEs going live with students in schools in September. We will be ramping into our new office at 55 Water beginning July 8th, at minimum 1 day a week in July. August, we will move to 2 to 3 days a week, and we expect September to be a full-time in the office. In addition to this ramp up, we are implementing improved process to review, approve, document, and monitor reasonable accommodation requests and alternative work arrangements. I expect this will be a little bit traumatic for some of our staff, and we will try to manage it as best we can. Sherry Chan's with us again tonight, our actuary. She has a number of items for consideration of the board. It's going to be a busy night. Among these is the preliminary fiscal 2022 actuarial determined contribution. This calculation presented to you in a document that was distributed earlier has stirred some turmoil as it implements some assumption changes that are either determined by the actuary or set by Albany legislation. Sherry will explain the breadth and impact of these changes, but I would like to remind trustees that we voted in support of these assumption changes at a previous Board of Trustees meeting. Finally, tonight we are presenting the fiscal 2022 budget proposal with the expectation that we will vote on this final budget in June. There are some significant items in the budget I would like to highlight before Daniel and Chitra present the budget. BERS has historically relied on the DOE's HR Connect medical staff to perform disability-related case reviews. This relation has a history of working acceptably well. During the pandemic, however, delays have become extensive. This has created a backlog of significant cases, which is unfortunate for applicants. We attempted to negotiate a pay for service arrangement with HR Connect to improve their responsiveness. Recently, we've been notified by the HR Connect medical staff and management that they are unlikely to be able to support our needs and that we should look for other support. This will push us to look for support from another New York City agency or contract these services independently. The budget has a significant new estimated cost for this at $2.2 million, which we conservatively estimated based upon some general market research. While I do not believe the final solution to this problem will be as expensive as the budget reflects, we have very little time to respond to this requirement, and we're trying to be conservative. There's also a new $200,000 estimated charge for cyber insurance. This is responding to the recommendations of internal, external, controller, and DFS auditors. I probably left out at least one auditor who also recommended it. And also, we're requesting 4 additional headcount. This is not sufficient to address all the challenges we face in providing best-in-class support for our members, but we are conscious of the city's and DOE's budget challenges. There are some savings in the budget related to winding down of systems implementations, the final go lives for velocity, scheduled upgrades, and system improvements. Daniel and Chicha will be reviewing this information in more detail later in the meeting. And I thank you for your attention. Back to you, Russ. Russ?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, just switched over to the phone. Hopefully that works. Hopefully I'm not getting. Okay, sorry.
You sound good.
All right. Next on the agenda is the fiscal 22 budget presentation by Daniel and Chitra. May I have a motion to discuss? Thank you, John. Second, Tom. Daniel and Chitra, please tell us about the budget.
Actually, Russell's a little change. We're going to throw it to Antonio. We're going to put the budget in contrast to our investments and our corpus for the board. Antonio.
Can everybody hear me?
Volume's a little low, Antonio.
All right, I'll turn it up a little bit. So I'll be very quick because we do want to get to the rest of the presentation. But before we kind of begin, we wanted to give you a kind of an overview of the admin budget, in particular, those costs in relation to the overall corpus of our fund and the performance of our fund over the last 10 years. So, before we kind of begin, just wanted to tell you what is corpus funding, and to give folks who have not been on the board through previous discussions of the administrative budget. BERS administrative budget is actually funded by the corpus or the total assets of the pension plan and not directly from the city budget. And so we can think of administrative budget as another cost similar to asset management fees. And many pension plans, when they think about their overall cost of running the plan, think about it in those terms as a percentage of the overall corpus of the plan. And really, I think the point of this is that our long-term outperformance of the plan versus its benchmark and versus the 7% return has historically outpaced the administrative budget increases. And I think we're gonna do a little bit of crowing here. So you guys see this. I've seen this at other at the SIM and kind of other presentations. This is direct information from State Street and the Bureau of Asset Management from the last 10 fiscal years. Over the previous 10 fiscal years, BERS portfolio has returned 9.73% versus a benchmark return of 9.30%. Importantly, we're the only one of the 5 systems who have beaten its benchmark over that time period. You see this comparison here that we have the highest return with actually the second lowest benchmark return. So seeing a substantial 43 basis point year-over-year outperformance for the past 10 years. And what that has meant for our corpus is that the incremental budget increase that we're asking for is a fraction of that relative outperformance. And we're being conservative in this kind of mode because we're looking at the outperformance against our benchmark and not against the 7% return that actuarial rate of return. So that 43 basis point outperformance, our estimate is that it's worth $207 million to the corpus over the previous 10 years. And remember, that outperformance keeps growing over time as the base of the assets grow. And to give you a different example, if we were to have the same performance, the average performance of the other systems, that savings would have been somewhere between $270 and $370 million. And what that means is that our historic outperformance of the plan, again, against our benchmark, not against the 7%, which would increase it substantially, is equivalent to an additional $35 million a year in additional corpus to the current asset base. And this kind of gives you an idea that our historic outperformance has been between $20 and $30 million. This budget increase is looking at an incremental increase of $3 to $5 million at its current rate. And I think we really just wanted to show you that, if we're looking at it in the totality of the asset base on which we can charge the administrative budget, that has been growing much, much faster than the increases that we've been asking for historically, particularly given the outperformance over the previous decade. And so, Daniel, I don't know if you want to go through the presentation first, but I can take questions before you and Cheezer drive.
No, could you just put that last slide up again, please?
Absolutely. All right.
And oh yeah, okay, great.
We good?
Okay, so the annual administrative budget is 30 million, or you're proposing 30 million for this year?
Yes, 30 million for this year, right?
Okay. And what was it last year?
You have those numbers, Daniel or Cheezer?
Last year was about $28 million last year.
Okay, so you're asking for $2 million increase when you have an investment increase of 3 to 5 million. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, so that was the incremental increase. I think we were going through the budget items. This is actually a little high. This was kind of the range of estimate when we made the presentation. The actual increase this year will be $2 million.
You'll see that in the next presentation.
I'm sorry, Antonio, in what? In the budget or in the increment?
In the budget.
Or in the performance?
In the budget. In the performance, yeah. In the budget.
Okay, so you went from 28 million to 30 million. That's 2 million increase. And
you'll see that in the next presentation in detail, Larian. We're going to go over that year over year.
Right, but to fund that, you have about, are you saying 20 million additional return on investment?
This is our annual outperformance versus our benchmark historically. So that essentially this is the actual increase this year. I mean, historically on say 9%, we're looking at $720 million in total investment performance. But this is our benchmark did 9% versus 9.7, or 9.3 versus 9.7, and so we're measuring just our performance against the benchmark is worth $20 to $30 million.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha now. All right, gotcha. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Antonio? Okay, Chitra, you're up. Chitra, you're on mute if you're trying to speak.
I'm so sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. One second, let me just pull up the presentation. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chitra Subramaniam. I'm the Director of Fiscal Operations. Today, Mr. Miller and I would like to present the preliminary administrative budget for fiscal year 2022. The preliminary budget for fiscal year 2022 is at 30.29 million, comprising of 17.23 million in the PS budget and 13.05 million in the OTPS budget. The budget for fiscal year 2020 was at 27.7 million. During FY21, BERS was mandated to reduce the administrative budget, based on which the budget was reduced to 26.9 million. The proposed fiscal year 2022 budget is at 30.29 million, an increase of 3.3 million from fiscal year 2021's budget and 2.5 million from fiscal year 2020's budget. I will now turn it over to Mr. Miller for more elaboration.
Just go to the. Okay. So if you recall last year, during the COVID pandemic, the city asked multiple agencies to reduce their budget. So we did that by reducing our temporary staff, reducing overtime, freezing pay for employees, no raises, and we had no new hires. For this fiscal year, what we want to do is increase our headcount by 4 employees. We sent you in your packet a breakdown of the staffing requests and where they were needed. The 4 headcount increase was not our initial request. It was only much more than that. And during that conversation with Lindsay and Russell, let's go to the next slide. A comparison came up between, no, I'm sorry, the next one, the last one. A comparison came up between, BERS and PPF, the Police Pension Fund of New York City, and that if we got the headcount that we requested, we would be approaching their headcount. So I wanted to have that larger discussion with the full board to really talk about the numbers in detail. As you can see, the headcount comparison, they have about 25 more employees than BERS has. We have virtually the same amount of active members. It's about 1,000 member difference. The retired members is a huge difference from PPF. However, retired members don't really drive transactions for a pension fund. Also, you can see we have a huge amount of potential members that are city employees that are not in BERS, almost 60,000 that we have to reach out to that PPF does not, because they have automatic enrollment. Our tier plan is our pension plan is much more complex than police. The police plan, they have 3 tier plans. We have over 20. We also administer the TDA, the 403B plan, which the police plan does not. A significant large portion of our members are women compared to the police plan. And also over half of our members are part-time members, which helps drive the complexity of the BERS plan, and our calculations are more difficult to administer. Now, you'd notice the difference in the AUM between the 2 funds of about 49 billion for police and 8.2 for BERS. And that's due to our members being some of the lowest paid city employees. So I just wanted to put that out there to compare and, highlight what we're trying to do to add more headcount to get to where we need to be to serve our members properly. Now, the 4 headcount that we are requesting is pivotal that we receive. What that will be used for is a service audit unit. What's occurred in the last 18 months as our processes have improved is that we found issues with our historical data, and that has led to members retiring or applying to retire that ended up not being able to retire. So what these 4 headcount would be used for is to create a unit to audit any service prior to a member retiring at BERS. As Sandy mentioned, some of the other larger changes to the budget was a $2 million cost for disability service that was used to be with the DOE. Also the $200K in cyber insurance. So with the staffing, it's about a $1.4 million increase with 4 headcount and 21 additional temps, and also $200K for cyber insurance. Those are the main drivers. We also had a reduced cost of about $1.8 million in CPMS from last year's budget to this year's budget. So those are the main drivers and changes to the budget. Any questions?
Yeah, Daniel, I had a question on, you said that there were members who signed up to retire, but in fact were not eligible to retire, and that had to be corrected.
Yes, unfortunately, this happened on more than one occasion. In the last 18 months, I've been at BERS 17 years. Prior to that, it never happened. But our process is much more robust now with our new systems.
Right.
And so the prior service calculation was incorrect. So they gave the member the incorrect member service. So it showed that at the time of the estimate, they were eligible to retire, but they were not eligible to retire.
Okay, and are our members on city time? Is that how they register? Do they do city time?
My members mostly DOE, so they use CyberShift.
Okay, right. Okay.
Daniel, Deb, I want to know, why can't we have automatic enrollment? What is stopping us from doing that?
So we proposed the bill twice in Albany. Both times it passed both houses. It's been vetoed by the governor twice. And I know the bill is going again in this term. I think Don will speak more to that again in Albany. Hopefully this time Cuomo will change his mind. We'll see.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Daniel, thank you so much, Daniel and Chitra and Antonio, for the context. May I ask, what were you asking for?
Our initial ask was 10.
Okay. And what were the other 6 for?
So the other 4 would have gone to the call center. Studies have shown by our data analytics team that to answer our calls in an appropriate rate to our peer benchmark, we needed a team of 12. So 4 would have went there. 2 would have went to the member communications unit. What's happened is we are swamped with emails, and now we have secure message through the new website. And it's taken about 2 to 3 weeks to return those messages, far too high. We have a chat feature on our website that we can't even turn on because we don't have the staff to staff it. So we can't even turn the feature that we have on.
I'm sorry, I think I misheard you. Did you say that it's taken 2 to 3 weeks to return emails?
To respond to members' emails, yes.
Okay, so can I ask another question that might be obvious, but I might be missing a step. Is there a reason why you brought the 4 to us as opposed to the 10 for open consideration?
Those conversations that we've had with Russell and Lindsay on what the
Yeah,
comfort
since
going
we're
forward.
talking about that, since we are talking about that now openly, those staff were moved to the temporary staff column, correct, Daniel?
Yes, they moved to the temporary staff column, correct. It's
So
not
let's just be
ideal
clear
temps. Yeah,
Let's just be clear about that. They weren't removed. They were moved to the temp column. That's what your team did.
The team moved into the temp column. Yes, they did. It's a stopgap measure. In the past, we've done I think a good job as we've got more headcount over the years to roll staff that were temp to full time. But we also run into the problem where we train folks, we educate them what BERS does, and then they leave. So it's not ideal, but it is, better than nothing.
So, Lindsay, may I ask, is there a reason why you weren't in love with the 10? Uh-huh.
Shannon, you just cut right to the chase every time.
I do. Sorry.
Thank you,
like
Shannon.
We don't got time to play.
It's like panel meetings. Shannon calls me to task. Shannon and Tom call me to task at the panel meetings all the time. All right, here we go. The city of New York continues to be under a hiring freeze. The hiring freeze is a 2-to-1 backfill hiring freeze. While the Department of Education has received significant new resources, the rest of the city has not received the same amount of additional resources. The city's policies and guidelines at the most recent executive budget still asked for city agencies to proceed with fiscal constraint and so on. And so I believe that we need to be mindful of the fiscal environment that the city of New York is in. And Antonio, I very much appreciate the helpful reminder about the source of the funds. Nevertheless, this is a board that cares about optics. And I think that this is a significant year-over-year budget increase that is being proposed now. And there's always an opportunity to have additional conversations about resources. And that's why we made the recommendation that we made.
Do you mind if I? Oh, go ahead, Isaac.
Sorry, Tom. So a couple things and then an observation. There's a part of me that says that being that we're corpus funded, there's an optics to that. To be quite blunt, I'll be politically correct. We're not doing as well as we would like to with getting back to our members. Now, I'll tell you how interesting this is. I'm at work and I'm sitting with a colleague and I'm talking and I mentioned that I'm on the BERS board. And we had somebody come into the office and this woman said, "Oh, BERS is my pension fund." I says, "What are you talking about? You're here at the Postal Service." She says, "No, I'm a lunch lady. And I work at a school and I also have BERS." And I guess what I'm trying to say here is, here I was looking at a person who's going to retire in maybe 5 years, and there's a face now, right, to this. She's one of our members. I would hate to be the person that, I got to answer, like, why is it taking 2 weeks to get to her with the wrong numbers as to when she can leave? And then an observation that I have is I've had numerous conversations with various funds at conferences, and when they go digital and they have an app out there, polls go up because you've given more information. So now people have questions about that information. So I don't think we're going to see our need for head count go down. It's going to go up. And so I'm just wondering why it is that we can't just use the money that we've got. We are different. If it got in the posts that we're giving the wrong numbers to people 2 weeks late and their checks 6 months late, that optic would be horrible. So I just want to put that out there because it's been bothering me, and there it is.
For what,
And
for what
if
it's worth, those of us who work at the Department of Education are on the receiving end of escalations from our our members on this topic on a very regular basis.
I can
I am
imagine.
very well aware of the lack of service or the delays in service. I am not debating the lack of service. I'm representing the city of New York and the fiscal policies and guidance that the mayor has put out at his most recent budget conference. The rest of the pension boards have a representative from the mayor's office as well as the controller's office that sit on their board. In this instance, unfortunately, that responsibility falls to me. And so I am representing the city of New York in this regard, such as it is. And so
I hear you.
that is where
so
I am coming from. Other pension boards do not have the flexibility that we have. And we have used that to our advantage from time to time. And maybe that is something that this board will choose to do again. So I just want to be very clear that I am aware of the fact that we are lagging on many, many metrics and that we are not providing our members the level of service that they deserve. Nevertheless, I have to represent the city of New York's fiscal policies and guidance, which, as I said before, are still operating in an area of fiscal constraint. There is a citywide hiring freeze that is still in place. I know that the Department of Education is in a very unique circumstance with the federal resources, but the resources that came to DOE are education specific. We got more money than the entirety of the rest of the city of New York in terms of stimulus funding. So I just want to represent that piece of it. This would be a very different conversation if John Adler was on the board, if the controller was on the board.
All right. But now, mind you, the dollars for our head count wouldn't come from DOE. They would come from our own. Am I right on that, or am I misunderstanding? They would come from our own.
The BERS
fund.
budget is part of the Department of Education's budget. It's a pass-through. The corpus funding is a revenue source that goes through there like that. The pension systems the rest of the pension systems are managed by the Office of Management and Budget much more closely than BERS is, because BERS is under the Department of Education umbrella, whereas the rest of the pension systems are set up as separate agencies and they're managed as such. And they are just managed very differently from the city of New York because the mayor's office sits on the board and because the Office of Management and Budget plays a much closer role in their ability to hire.
so I have a question, and what prevents us then? I get that, there's this hiring freeze and all that stuff, but if we're in a place where we are not providing the service in a way that members need it, then what prevents us from setting this up in a way that it does? Like I'm missing something, because I'm like, there's like billions of dollars that we manage, but then at the same time, there's 2 weeks to get an email returned and all of these other, like, what prevents us from setting our service up in a way that it works properly?
Can I jump in? That's a great question, Tom. And I guess my response is to toss it back. In the 2.5 years I've been on this board, why when we look at these abysmal service metrics, why am I convinced that your headcount remedy is going to fix this, what I would call subpar, certainly not best in class customer service? Why would I believe that that's the remedy, that's going to be the panacea, when I haven't seen that? In the 2.5 years I've been on, the metrics have absolutely slipped. We talked about that at our executive board when we looked at the CEM benchmarking. I know we're in public session right now. And then, we have this huge investment in the Velocity project that's gone on since whatever. That's supposed to be a member service improvement. And And then my third piece is our success also leads to, we know that on this agenda, we have a recalibration of the market value of the actuarial value of the assets, which is going to lead to a $47 million reduction in our employer contribution this year. So that's a lot, but this is all building on what Tom just asked. So what's preventing us? Well,
Okay, let's address your questions and your concerns. So let's go back in time a little bit. The initial request was made to this board 4 years ago. Sandy, was it 4 years ago? When Ray was on the board, you weren't here yet, Natalie. We looked at everything. When Sandy and I took over, we said we needed 50 at that point. That's what we said we needed, right? The board was not comfortable with that number, went to 25 over 2 years. That was the initial agreement that we came to, right? So we had to say, what's going to be the most efficient and cost effective for the members to apply these folks into the office, right? And you also have to recall, we had a new system come in, the Prudential went away, that had to bring a whole back office into BERS to process all the BERS payrolls, 58 payrolls per month. Very, very complicated. We had to hire a whole new team to do that. We had backlogs in prior service. That cost members money. It was a 2-year backlog that if you applied for prior service, basic service before you joined BERS, that you accrued interest every day the calculation went on, right? Transfers, refunds. So we applied all those members to those backlogs in those units that cost the members money. So that was the focus for 25. It was the back office we had to do because Prudential left, and all the cost operational metrics. So if you look at that, Natalie, those backlogs are now pretty much all gone. So that was the focus of the previous 25 over the last 4 years. So this is before your tenure, a lot of this. So that was the focus of the headcount at that point. Now, what we're talking about now is almost the customer service, customer facing, except for the service audit unit. That still is, well, again, it's customers as well. That's a calculation. But other than that, these are all pretty much member facing communications, outreach. That's what these folks would now do. The service we're now applying to members. So this is what this focuses on. So it's 2 different metrics. What was the other question you had? I'm sorry, that kind of the big one you asked.
well, I mean, I appreciate that, and I know we've discussed that before. I guess it sort of goes back to the root cause. Why was there a 2-year backlog there? What else is happening?
Okay,
in the
how
process of
far do
this
you want me to have to
operation?
go back? Because listen, if you go back even further than that, to the Bloomberg years at BERS, when he was trying to merge BERS into the other one, to NYSERS and to TRS, that they had a BERS headcount freeze for a number of years where BERS staff didn't grow at all, while membership kept increasing. So we're trying to make up for years and years of neglect of the system. So it's, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. One of the things that like I keep thinking about this and I got to go there, right? So I think, I worked at Apple for 10 years, right? And one of the things I learned is, one, like one detractor has the same weight as 10 promoters, right? And, I wonder how many people are sitting around like, well, it took BERS 2 weeks to answer my email, or I thought I was going to retire, but I couldn't. And I wonder how many people tell other people not to even bother to sign up because they're not going to get it right. And my thing is, if we are trying to make sure that we reach all of the people that are eligible, then we have to make sure that our customer service, like the service that we provide, is tight. And if that means making the investment necessary to get it right, then, I think we need to do that. I think we need to sit down, figure out exactly what we need, put a number on it, bring it to this board, and we need to consider it and pass it.
And Tom, if I just might make a point, I don't want to forget this. You're our CEC elected, right? So all your CEC AAs are BERS members, and are all, because I know my old AA reaches out to me regularly on her retirement calculations and so on. So just a little thing to throw in that mix.
So I put some stuff in the chat, and I'm not going to belabor the moment because I know that we have a very ambitious agenda. I just want to say that I know Sandy and I almost fell out. Well, really, Sandy stopped liking me for a few moments
Never.
there because I had a very animated conversation with him when I found out from a colleague directly that I used to work with that someone's retirement, someone had gotten called back. Someone I actually knew had gotten called back and was told they had to come back to work and work several more months because their calculation was miscalculated, right? And not that I knew him directly, one of my good friends knew him and told me the story when he was like, oh, so let me tell you about your fund. So echo, amen, I agree, as my, first grader does, like to everything that Isaac said. And because I would not be myself, I have to say what I put in the chat, which is when you think about optics, Lindsay Oates, because I loved how you spun that, sis. I loved how you spun that. Optically, our membership is largely people of color and women. And I hear you, I understand. So listen, I agree with Tom. I think that the full board needs to have this discussion, and you guys need to bring to us the 10. And if that's really crazy, Lindsay, then maybe we can have a conversation about like what it would look like. I can just tell you personally, for me, that 2 to 3 week thing to me is as unacceptable as them cheers in the hallway when I walked off that elevator during Thanksgiving 2.5 years ago.
Can I just ask a question here? Because I unless I misunderstood, did the budget include 4 heads and then some additional funding for temporary workers that actually will do this work as well?
Yes, it does include
Okay.
money for the 4 full accounts and temps that would assist in doing this work. The
And
issue we
how
have with
many-
temporary employees is that because they're not city employees, they don't have access to all the same systems. So they're limited in the type of work they can do for BERS.
Okay, so and how many temporary workers were added?
I'm sorry, the last part
How
again?
many temporary workers would come on?
21.
21. Okay. And they're limited in the access they can have to information. I mean, is that part of the problem?
That's correct.
That is one issue with temporary employees. The other issue is sometimes we train them in very much specific BERS information. It takes a long time to do, and they get a job with benefits. They leave, so start process all over again. So
Well, but that happens with city workers as well.
Yeah.
You train them and they leave. All right. So is there anything that can be done, at least at the moment, temporarily, that would allow some of these temp workers to have the access to the information they need so that they can reduce the time that people have to wait to get their emails responded to?
No, that's city
How
rules.
is that possible? It's
That's
like I almost
control.
don't understand. How is that possible?
It's
Why is-
controlled by the DOE, and they put restrictions on access to the network and crucial systems to only certified, investigated, fingerprinted employees. It's a security issue, Larian.
And through the DOE, not
Correct.
just like
And
they've come through school professionals. They don't take their word for it. They have to
correct.
be full-time DOE employees. That's a systems thing.
That's
the temps would
correct. And
definitely
we,
help. The temps would definitely help. It's not ideal. I'm sensitive to what Lindsay said. I look. I work at BERS. I'm a citizen of the city of New York. I see the bigger issue that Lindsay's talking about, and the temps is not an ideal solution, but it will assist us in serving the members better.
Okay, because I mean, the reason I was asking is I know, with my history at ONB that there's more resistance to hiring because although, frankly, we all know the city budget is much better than it was a few weeks ago. But there's always resistance to adding heads, but there's not as much resistance to adding temps because you have flexibility. And
Yes.
is there any way you can shift your labor force around so that you can shift some people who are BERS employees to doing this kind of work and have more temps do the other kind of work where they don't need a security clearance like the CIA gives?
unfortunately, when you put a person in front of a member, they need to have experience, understand our systems, know the answers to questions. Otherwise, they're just another obstacle. So to put a temporary worker in a position where they're just speaking with a member, which is where our weakness is right now, right? We are having difficulty managing our relationships with members and the targeting the unenrolled. And we can't send unexperienced part-time workers to educate people. It just doesn't work.
But I mean, I understand that, but you cannot, but I, is it not possible to hire experienced temporary workers to do this work? Because I mean, you cannot teach them the matrix and the parameter and have them do reasonable amount of face-to-face work with the members.
That's the plan right now, Larian. It's these 21 would go to the call center, would go to member communications unit to respond to answer the phone in a manner, respond to the emails.
Yeah.
So that's what they would do.
Okay, so then that should relieve some of the burden on the time lag in getting an email response, correct?
That's the goal, yes.
That's the goal.
So can you come back to the board once this happens and give us some sense of is that time reduced?
Sure.
And we do the CEM benchmarking annually. And
okay, great. Celebration. And again, I sort of understand the OMB position. There's a real sense of if you hire someone, you don't ever want to have to lay someone off. So, but temporary workers help. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Can I just throw out there just quickly, what if we wanted to propose a compromise here on the budget? Would we pass through the budget and then amend next month with a proposal, another proposal?
we could do that. We had structured it to have this conversation and vote on the budget finally in June. So that gives us time to amend the budget proposal and share it with trustees.
Okay, if we do that though, I think we need a real plan and an efficiency plan, essentially with a time period for accomplishing said goals. Because, otherwise it's just, okay, we want 4 this year, we want 7 next year, but we need some real metrics and a way to measure whether we're attaining the goals. To Natalie's comments earlier.
And Deb, we can supply that. We have implemented trackers on everything we do. We can tell you exactly how many calls we manage, exactly how many emails, and we can provide you the benchmarking against our comparable systems across the country. We can tell you the wait times. I mean, we have all that data. As a matter of fact, if I only shared it with Tom 2 months ago, but if trustees would like to see our monthly operating reports, I would defer to Tom. He's seen them. Be happy to share them. Every month you can see the deterioration and improvements. I think Donald wants in.
Donald, hold on one second. Jacqueline's hand has been up for like an hour.
I'm like, sorry, y'all, trying to manage the baby, hubby, working multiple jobs, basic stuff. Yes, so I wanted to, someone keeps saying hello. Yes, this is Jacqueline.
Donald Nesbitt. Yes, Donald Nesbitt. I believe my phone is breaking up. I'm not sure. Can you all hear me?
It's okay, Donald. Go ahead. I'll go after you, Donald.
Yeah, my phone is breaking up. My apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I don't think
Donald,
he's
we
talking.
I don't think he's talking to us.
He's talking to someone else.
And you can't mute people in this environment, can you? I don't think so.
Karen, is it possible?
The little mute symbol just showed up. On
You did now. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
There we
Okay.
go.
So first off, just a couple of points about this. When I first became a new BERS member, I actually reached out to Sandy directly, because I come from the communications and marketing background, because I really wanted to have a clear understanding of why, Sandy had alluded to lines were being dropped, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, this is, with the city. So I reached out, Sandy connected me to their director of operations and their director of marketing and comm team, along with their call center. And so we thoroughly went through their monthly report, which is a 30-page report, so I can assess and see like what the situation was. And even on a good day, with their rock star call center person answering 65 phone calls a day, there were over 600 calls that were dropped. And so I say this to really stress the importance of increasing the budget to have more folks. And I know that we have limitations, but the other issue that we discussed and encountered directly, because I go straight to middle managers, because as much as I love you, Sandy, I always want to talk to the middle managers, because they're the ones that are actually talking to the staff, and they're the ones that are talking to the retirees calling in. And one of the things that they're telling us is communication, language barriers, detailed information, because anybody, all of us that are on this call right now, anything that has to do with retirement, IRAs, 401ks, that's a lot for someone to really digest and break it down, because they're managing 500 other things, making sure they get to work at 7 a.m., dropping their kids off at their own schools. And so I would encourage us to really review the budget thoroughly. I think that Mr. Miller, Daniel Miller, you're being very modest in saying 10. In my 20 plus years in marketing and communications and working at a call center, you're going to actually need to double that, almost 20, because we still don't know how many people are going to really officially retire, how many need multiple languages, translation services. And so there's a whole communication aspect to that. But I do want to echo the sentiments of what Shannon and Tom said, especially the BIPOC communities of color and the seniors. There's a lot of patience. So remember, imagine you're a teacher for 30, 40 plus years. It's time for retirement. It's probably going to take you about an hour just to sign up, create a user ID and password on some sort of account. So there's a lot of shepherding and hand-holding in this process. So I would encourage our board to really review this budget and to increase, especially on the administration side, because hearing it straight from the horse's mouth, they need more help. And that's it. And I got to go back to my 1-year-old.
And
Yeah,
not to be.
This is. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to be really
that.
quick, and I was going to say, and not to beat a dead horse, not to beat a dead horse, but we also need people for a chat system that we don't have turned on, right? So, my thing is that, if we have a system in place that we can't even use because we don't have the people, then maybe we need the people, right? And, I try to keep it simple, because if we don't have the people to do what we need to do, then we need to get the people to do what we need to do. And, when you're having, and to just kind of add to what Jacqueline just said, I get that, temps can do part of this job, right? But at the same time, when you're having a complex conversation with someone about what a retirement package looks like, right? Then those are the people that have to be specially trained to do that and have the special access to do that. And if that means that, there's a process to do that, then we need to put those people in place. To me, and it's no offense to temps in any kind of way, but it's a Band-Aid. And my thing is, we need to stop putting Band-Aids on it. We need to do what we need to do so that it works the way that it needs to work. Donald, but I call difficulties. But I need everyone. I think part of the problems that we're having now is because we stood at 2 years last time, only to discover that we were far behind once we agreed to increase the headcount that we were asking for in the beginning.
We can't be, I want to say, we can't be socially conscious when it comes to some things. And then when servicing those vulnerable people, the city of New York has objection. We as workers in the night to even get into the pension, it was discriminatory then, and it is discriminatory now for workers to be serviced properly. Half of these workers and most of the workers that's in the system, we cheered during COVID, right? We cheered when they were providing services to families throughout our community. We cheered. But this is their golden watch, right? Service should be paramount, and that they should be appreciated. This board should, without a doubt, increase the headcount if service is going to better the service for the members that we serve, because a lot of them are underserviced in the jobs that they do every day while servicing everyone else. I urge the board that we look at this headcount seriously, and that we agree upon a count that's going to service the members once and for all. I sat here last time with Ray for almost 2 years fighting this out for a headcount. And politics shouldn't have a place when it comes to servicing the most vulnerable people in our society, which are the people that we service here. It's just disheartening. We had to fight to even get in a pension system, and my father, who was a BERS member and who has passed along now, is rolling over in his grave because he was a part of the school aides that were fighting to even get in the pension. I urge us to take a serious look at this, and if it's going to be in the best interest of our members, let's do it as a board.
So there's no vote this month, just for discussion. We're voting next month. Any more? I know we have a lot on the agenda. Are there any more questions on the budget or comments?
Summarize what everybody just said. I don't think there's anybody on this call that doesn't agree with what Donald just said. I think we all want the best service for our members. We also want all of our potential members to be members. I think that is the greatest disservice that we are doing. And I look at you, John and Donald, to say to those people that work their whole lives and then show up at their what they think is their pension consultation only to find out that they actually never enrolled. That's the greatest disservice. But do we all want 100% best in class service for our members? Of course. We also want to know that our resources are being deployed in a way that is realizing those goals. So all we're asking for, I think, is accountability and metrics to know that the money is going to where we want it to go. That's it.
And
So-
perhaps reworking this a little bit to account for some of the headcount that we actually need. Like if we can do that and have something to vote on next month, I think that would be great too.
So you're asking for multiple proposals?
Yes.
Various headcounts?
Yes.
I think that's probably what we'll present to the board. We'll try to get it out to you earlier than the week before, but we'll put together a series of proposals plus 4, plus 10.
I already have those during the whole process with various headcounts.
Okay, good.
So that's easy to get out. We can get that out to you like next week.
Good.
You can review it.
All right.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a presentation regarding an asset liability study conducted by Siegel Marco Advisors. May I have a motion to discuss? Thank you, John. Second from Shannon. Thank you. Antonio, please give us some background on this.
Absolutely, and I'll talk a little bit while Mike and Vanessa load up their screens. So the executive committee heard part of this already. BERS undertook an asset liability study. This is a complement to the kind of asset-only studies that we've done before. This takes a look at our portfolio and looks at it in relation to the ultimate purpose of our fund, which is to pay benefits now and into the future. And it looks at kind of how we're doing in that context, and then suggest portfolios that maximize not only looking at it from a return perspective, but most importantly, a funding and liquidity standpoint. So our goal ultimately is to pay pensions and be funded as possible. versus, I think just maximizing return over a 1-year period. And so I'll let Mike and Vanessa go through this quickly. We'll have more recommendations for you in the next several months. But Mike, take it away.
All right. And Vanessa, I'll provide kind of the play-by-play here, and Vanessa will chime in with some local color comments on some of the things that we talked about when we discussed this with the executive committee. And just to echo the one point Antonio made, that, and I think Sandy made it up front too, and I've been with BERS for quite a long time as the investment consultant. We have never before for BERS done an asset liability study. We've discussed it, and we've gone through asset allocation studies, as you know, but we do believe that this is a true best practice for plans of BERS size, and we also think that it should be on some regular cycle to review these kinds of information. I also want to point out, and you can see it if we go to here on slide 2, that the the objective of this slide was to look at both assets and liabilities, and I'm going to use this word, and we'll define stochastically, and that is run a broad array, 2,500 scenarios, to be able to get more than a feel that for how assets and liabilities interact than we might see when we just look at our annual asset allocation on a purely deterministic kind of one path route. The other point to make here is important background is that we focus in on the qualified pension plan, the QPP. We recognize the growth and the size of the TDA, and the guaranteed rate or the fixed rate on that account. But because of the way, I won't get into the details of this, but because of the way the funding for that flows back through from as part of the contribution back into the plan, we felt it was very important for the trustees to look at the funding of the basic QPP plan, which is the real defined benefit plan within the system, and come up with a set of metrics in terms of funding, in terms of ways that we're going to manage and track this going forward. And not to give away our conclusions, all our findings here, but in conclusion, I mean, we want to give comfort to the trustees up front that the QPP is a very well-funded plan, certainly compared to, you see the press about certain other systems. Illinois is kind of the poster child for funded status problems. Our plan very well funded, and that funded status is improving. And at least part of that, as you've heard in our performance reports that we give every quarter, is tied to just how well the fund has done, especially just coming out of the pandemic. So we do want to leave also the takeaway that we're going to talk about these asset allocations. We stress tested the portfolio in terms of the asset allocations we have, but some of the things that you've already heard us talk about were confirmed as we looked at the path that liabilities are going to go through and what our funding and contribution rates will be. And that is that we are underweight to infrastructure, to real estate, and to our private markets, especially credit. And those could really help our plan. And that we're going to make some demonstrations around that as we go through it. So if we go to the next page, or for any of you that page 3 here, these are some of the results. I'm going to go real quickly here. These are the valuation results. I know we have Sherry on the call here. Took these results right from the last 2 studies. Remember that there's a lag in the way that the valuation results. So the next valuation will be based on information as of June of 2019. And I want you to look at just a couple lines here. And one is just the progress valuation, the last 2 valuations, 17 and 18. 69% funded, down that funded ratio up third from the bottom, moving to 77%. And then, as I said, given the way the assets work and the way that the smoothing methodologies work, if we look at what our funding looks like it'll be when the next valuation goes through, we're going to move up to 94% funding. And that was my comment up front, that we have seen this steady improvement, and we expect a continued steady improvement in the funding of the plan. Let's move on to the page 3, which takes a look at some of the proposed changes. And I know you're going to be discussing these later. We ran this study taking into account the proposed changes that the Office of the Actuary has come up with. The most important one, or the one that at least from my investment lens, has a great deal of implication for the way that we look at the plan, is that expected reduction over time in the expected return on assets. And so that said, you can see that we have here down at the bottom, the compound rate of return for the plan. And I'll explain some of these columns. The target is is what our current investment policy statement. So the one we sent with the asset allocation last year. Last year we've used in this study that our new set of assumptions for 2021 to bring kind of the most current thinking about where stocks and bonds and the other asset classes will be. But we looked at, and then next to that, the current column, the 6.8%, is where our current asset allocation is. So if we look at the market value as of year end, 6.8% is the number that's generated by the returns we have. So right there, you can see a bit of a spread. If we were at our investment policy from where we were, from where we are right now, we would indeed be able to slightly improve the rate of return. But even at our current policy and thinking about some of the things that might happen with the change to the expected return on assets, the plan is expected to achieve that rate of return. We then went through some stress testing to put into the stochastic model and match the liabilities of some alternative portfolios. And in fact, we had a lot more portfolios than this, and we narrowed down for presentation purposes to kind of assure you that looking at either higher return, lower risk portfolios, or looking at different levels of, at the bottom line, you can see there are different levels of contribution or amount allocated to the basket clause. We can vary the rate of return and the risk return profile of the fund. And we'll be looking at these portfolios, not so much for what the absolute level of allocation is, although you can see if you take, for example, the infrastructure line here, that our current level of infrastructure at 2%, well below where we'd like to be, which is 4%, and we consistently want to increase that infrastructure allocation. And we think we are going to, as Antonio said, we're going to come back with some additional recommendations because we've just lagged behind where we want to be in that allocation, and to our detriment to a certain extent over the past couple of years. And we're really focused on infrastructure, excuse me, some of the private markets and real estate as places where we're just below our objective. And we think in terms of the current environment, those are asset classes that should be much closer to our proposed allocation. So let's go to the next page just to start to give it. This is purely background on kind of the left spaghetti kind of chart there, showing that we ran these multiple scenarios defined as our stochastic projections. But more importantly, I think on the right-hand side, the way we summarize them down so that you could see them. And I think you're familiar from looking when we compare a manager in a peer group and we show the quartile breakouts of the performance from best to worst. Similarly, when we're talking about contributions or funding or some of the other components of this asset liability study, we ranked those the scenarios and the outcomes from best to worst. Now you can say that you see the red diamond down there. 5% of the outcomes were that kind of worst case scenario. Some would define that maybe as define it as a worst case. The blue dot, which you'll consistently see through the rest of the presentation, is the median results, and that's kind of where we target our recommendations around what's going to happen at the median, kind of the middle scenario from those 2,500 different possible tests we could run. I was going to say that the red dot there, sometimes you hear it called as value at risk, kind of the measurement for when is defining the worst case as the value at risk, but just as a definition there. Let's move on to the next page and start to look at some of these stochastic projections using, and we go, apologize in advance, we sometimes call it the target or the policy portfolio. So this is kind of where we are, where our plan would be if we just stayed with the kind of results that we expected when we did the last asset allocation study. And really the chart to look at here on the bottom to the left defines how we think that market value of asset funded ratio will improve. Remember I said I expect it to improve, gave some indication just based on where we think it'll be in 2019 based on what we know about assets so far. But because of the superior return during 2020 and looking out kind of over the next couple of years, and you'll see you've got the forecast here going out for 10 full years, we think there's about an 82% probability the plan will be overfunded. That is, from that 94% number you saw before to something like 100% with an 82% probability as of June of 2021. So next June, when we look at these assets, that's one of the kind of metrics that we've set here for achieving the returns we're going to talk about, and then what kind of funded level we'll have from that. And in the worst case, that kind of value at risk, that low percentile number, even if that were to even if we were to get the lowest returns from these multiple scenarios that we projected here, we'd be back in line with kind of you saw we started at about 77%. Over 5 years, we wouldn't be really any worse than we were a year or two ago. And over 10 years, I mean, I having been around with this plan for a very long time, I can tell you that we were in the mid to low 60s when I first started to work on this plan. So to be able to have that kind of comfort, I think, as trustees and fiduciaries for this plan over the longer horizon is very appropriate in terms of the metrics that we can talk about with participants and beneficiaries, that this plan is very sustainable in terms of the way that we're both funding it, investing it, and really the way the city contributions are helping to contribute to that. On the next page, we talk a little bit about some of the projections that we did with the policy portfolio, and there are some unique items, and we talk about them. I'm going to focus here on the bottom chart. Really, some unique things that go on with the BERS portfolio with regards to New York. First is that TDA, which contributes some extra return, actually extra contribution to the fund in periods when the QPP or the broad group of assets actually earn less than the 8.25% promised to the TDA participants. We get some extra contribution for that. But even looking at those total kind of contributions and looking at where kind of our results would be, you know that there's very little downward pressure on our contributions in overfunded scenarios. As we had our conversations with the city actuary and we looked at how contributions might change, with a typical corporate plan or with some other plans that I work with, as funding increases, there is a kind of an upper limit to where contributions would trail off or cease, and that is not the kind of funded limit that's set by, or the funding contribution level that's set by statute in the case of the New York City plan. And I'm probably misstating that, Sherry. I'm let you chime in if you want, but the way that we looked at this, the way that even in the worst case, the annual contributions could approach 500 million towards the end of that 10-year period that we've looked at here, but at the median case, we're significantly better than that. So let's go to the next page just to start to put some of the asset and liability scenarios together. Actually, let's, in terms of keeping timing here, why don't we jump ahead to page 9, Vanessa? And I'm just going to focus in on kind of looking at the alternative portfolios that we looked at. And you heard me talk about the different mixes and the stock bond mix and what the expected returns are. And what the bottom chart here on the left shows and puts together is a way to kind of compare the improvement in the results of the plan. So think about the return of the plan and compare that to the protection on the downside. And so the downside protection would be, what's our funded level look like in kind of worst case scenarios? And then along the left-hand side is, what does our funded status look like kind of at the median if we achieve the returns that we expect with the different portfolios? And arrayed across the top there, our policy/target is the one that is what we currently include in our expected return number when Siegel Marco looks at where our mix should be, and we make recommendations about how much to have in infrastructure or real estate that I talked about. And then A, B, and C are some of the other portfolios with varying levels of risk and return. Current is where where based on our ability and our pacing right now and what assets look like at 12/31 where the portfolio is, where the first visual you can get from this chart on the bottom left there, if we looked out in present value to everything for looking out the next 10 years, well, where you want to be is toward, if we could find it, toward the top and left, right? We'd want better absolute funding and limited downside. And indeed, there are some portfolios that all these portfolios blend that together, but the current portfolio is kind of one of the least attractive in terms of where we could be compared to, say, mix A, C, or the policy. And I'm really focusing on the policy here because as we've gone through the whole study, one of our conclusions at the end was, gosh, our policy based on looking at it asset only, and even when comparing the liabilities and the kind of funded characteristics, our policy recommendation and just getting to those targets would be an appropriate mix of downside protection. We'd still, in our worst case, stay at that 68 to 70% kind of downside funded ratio. But meanwhile, we could be targeting 112 kind of percent of funded at the median compared to the current, which isn't markedly lower. It's still above 100%, still good, but it's down about 400 or 500 basis points from where we could be if we were at the current. Now, as I said, we stress tested some other portfolios. We said, oh gosh, as we get more funded, maybe we just want to dramatically increase the amount of bonds and really protect ourselves on the downside. And quite honestly, if we were doing this and we were at a significant percentage higher of funding, 115 kind of percent funded, we may indeed think about starting to de-risk the portfolio. But at this point, this blend of looking at improved median results and protection on the downside, we think are very well served by the current policy portfolio. Yes, we could take a little more risk and kind of ramp up the funding. That's mix C and mix A from our perspective. But in any event, I want to leave the trustees with the takeaway that when you hear us talk about asset allocation and rebalancing and where we want to do searches, getting us back toward the policy based on the results of this study seems like kind of our first priority, certainly over the next fiscal year. Let's go to the next page 10, which takes, and this gets a little more complex, but one of the ways to think about that's the same level of array would be, what if we adjusted the funding level for whether and create this thing called economic cost by subtracting or adding the surplus from the contribution. So if there was a surplus, we would subtract it from the contributions, and if there wasn't, we would add it to it. And that's a way to kind of view the true economic cost to the city of our plan, right? Because that way they get a little credit when we're in surplus by saying contribution, by adjusting through the contributions and vice versa. Well, the bottom line, and here we switch from percentage funded to dollars, really gives us the same kind of answer. The policy mix versus the current, or even increasing the risk a little bit or decreasing the risk a little bit, which is what happened with portfolios A and C, don't really give us the same kind of appropriate blend between downside protection on a dollar value and improved dollars in terms of the median results. And that bottom left chart kind of brings that all home. The top chart is really just showing what those median dollar levels would be for the different mixes. So from the analysis that we went through, we focused in on kind of the different mixes to stress test whether our allocations to stocks, bonds, infrastructure, real estate were appropriate, came away with the conclusion that the current level was not as appropriate as trying to improve it a little bit. And we'll summarize that here on the last page. Vanessa's keeping me moving. We talked about high yield private credit infrastructure, the ones that are underweighted in the current. They're detrimental to our objective of improving funding at lower costs. I want to emphasize the TDA was not included, but its effects in the best and worst performance cases essentially lever the results commensurately, which means that when our return on our portfolio, the actual return on our portfolio is less than the TDA return, that's worse for us because we essentially have to top up anyone that leaves and pays from the TDA from the balance of the assets, and we get additional contribution for that. But there's a lag effect. On the other hand, when we earn, as we have for the last year, above the 8.25, we get a benefit from that because we've earned more than we have to pay out, and we have that extra earnings on the TDA assets to feed into the rest of the plan. Another metric that we have here is coming out of this study. Siegel's recommendation is that a range of 100 to 115% is an appropriate baseline for setting our investment objectives. We've talked a lot about whether we wanted to reduce the risk of this portfolio. At many peer funds, as you increase your funding, you might think about taking a lower volatility portfolio to mitigate the downside results. We don't think we're quite there yet. We'd like to see a sustainable level in that 100 to 115% range before we talked about that. And so I'll conclude with the same things I mentioned up front, that we have very good funded status compared to peers. And at the median case, we have a very strong, I think as trustees and fiduciaries, you can present very strong quantitative and qualitative evidence that the sustainability and improved funding over the 10-year horizon is appropriate for the kind of plan this is and for the beneficiary demographic. And with that, I'll pause for any questions or any follow-up. Hearing none. Back to you, Antonio.
All right, absolutely. And so I think the big thing for us at our next executive committee meeting and through the summer, we're going to be coming to you with recommendations that get us to our policy, right? We've had, certain circumstances where we've tried to top up certain investments, ask for more. Just to be clear, some of these recommendations may be different than any of the other systems. We think the asset liability study has shown the best thing for us right now is to get to policy. And we think we have to move forward. And so recommendations through the summer will be around how we get to policy in the quickest way possible. So, I think we'll see that through the next several months.
I just want to
Thank you,
say,
Antonio. Go ahead,
I
Natalie.
just want to say, sorry, Ross, how much I appreciate that this team undertook this study. I know that we are the only one of the 5 systems that did this. Maybe they didn't want to see the answer. Who knows? But it's kind of an extraordinary piece of work. And again, what you said is for us as trustees, for whatever little time we have here, we should feel very good about the health of the system, and also this sort of cross check, I guess, on the value of the asset allocation process, because this certainly bears out that long, hard process. Definitely that policy is where we want to be. So I hear what you're saying, Antonio, and I support that.
Agreed. Thank you, Natalie, and I'll echo all the comments that Natalie just made. Looking forward to seeing what the proposals look like next month. So thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to Antonio's whole team. I know it was a real team effort for the BERS investment team. So appreciate that nuanced discussion there. Seeing no other questions from the board, we're going to move on to the next item on the afternoon's agenda, calendar items 2 through 17. The ordinary business of BERS. May I have a motion to consider calendar items 2 through 17? First, John. May I have a second? Tom. Thank you both. Alex, please tell us about the ordinary business of BERS.
Certainly. These are all the retirements, death benefits, and refunds that have been processed since the last regular meeting of this board.
Thank you, Alex. We will now vote on these items. All in favor of approving calendar items 2 through 17, please indicate your approval now. Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is calendar item 18, authorization to amend an agreement with eVestment to provide a public market investment manager database to the Board of Education Retirement System. May I have a motion to consider calendar item number 18? Thank you, Michael. Thank you, John, with a second. Antonio, can you please tell us about this resolution?
Absolutely, and I'll do it quickly. This is a re-up for a contract that we have with eVestment. They are the primary public markets database for investment managers. In fact, an investment manager cannot be considered for a allocation throughout New York City, certainly through Siegel Barker, without being in the eVestment database. This will give the team access to that database to look at managers for potential allocations. So we're asking for a 1-year renewal to this agreement.
Thank you, Antonio. Any other questions for Antonio? I'll note that this renewal is for about $21,000. Hearing no questions, we will now vote on this item. All those in favor of calendar item number 18, please indicate your approval. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The next agenda items are investment related, which belong in executive session. May I have a motion to enter executive session? Thank you,
So
John.
moved.
Thank you. Second from Isaac. I'm looking at the screens, people. Let's vote. All those in favor of entering executive session, please indicate your approval. Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. We are now in executive session. Karen.
Okay, recording's been gone, and I admitted the individuals back in. You may proceed.
Thanks so much, Karen. We are now in public session. Alex, would you please report out on the board's actions taken during executive session?
During executive session, the board voted to approve calendar item 20, authorization to the controller to commit a portion of the private equity portfolio, and calendar item 21, authorization to the controller to commit a portion of the real assets portfolio. Additionally, the board voted to table calendar item 19, authorization to the controller to commit a portion of the infrastructure portfolio.
Thank you so much, Alex. The next item on our agenda is calendar item 22, adoption of the actuary's determination for the final fiscal year 2021 employer contribution to the New York City Board of Education Retirement System. May I have a motion to consider? Thank you, Tom. Second, John. Sherry, would you please tell us about this resolution?
Sure thing. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to pull up the first item, which is the fiscal year 21 employer contribution. This letter was sent to the board. It does determine the contribution to be $182.9 million. This does represent a decrease of $47.4 million from the preliminary 21 contributions. This is due to some of the things that were already discussed earlier this evening in this board meeting, mainly because of the assumptions and methods change that package that this board did adopt in January. And part of that was to increase the actual value of assets to equal the market value of assets. And due to this higher asset value, that's why we saw earlier from the Siegel-Markle presentation that the funded ratio has increased, which also means that the unfunded liability has decreased and therefore the employer contribution has decreased. So there is a resolution at the end of this memo, and I'd be happy to address any questions or turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Sherry. Any questions from the board on this item? I do have one for Alex, actually. I just wanted to clarify my understanding of the board's responsibility here. We're requested to adopt the determination, but voting yes or no on this doesn't actually change anything as far as the calculation is concerned, correct?
It's my understanding that the actual, let's see, where to begin? Firstly, yeah, you're correct, Russell, that legislative action is required to actually change the assumed rate of return. So in fact, it wouldn't matter. So this doesn't in fact matter. However, there is a significance to the gesture of the board adopting this this estimate. There is some significance to that.
Yeah, yeah, you're not wrong. I bring it up simply because there was a involved discussion at TRS regarding their adoption of both this item, which is the final fiscal 21 employer contribution, as well as the preliminary fiscal 22 contribution. This board voted to approve the actuary's package in January. So I certainly feel in alignment with approving both this contribution and the contribution for next year. But Natalie and I both had the pleasure of sitting through a very entertaining Teachers Retirement System board meeting about 2 weeks ago, discussing this these two agenda items that are in front of us today for BERS. This one and the next one that will be raised.
Yeah, fundamentally, I think this hinges well, Sherry certainly can speak more about this, but I think this hinges on assumptions about inflation.
That is correct. Yes.
But, but Russ, you are
yeah.
correct, basically.
Yeah, it's calculated using proposed legislation. Technically, there is, my understanding is technically all relevant legislation determining the AIR for our systems for next year is actually expired currently. So there is the actuary's proposal, there are other proposals as well, but ultimately this is what's been prepared and is presented to the board today. So Natalie, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, it expires June 30th, correct? It hasn't expired yet.
Yes. It expires June 30th, and the proposal is to have the rate be retroactive to this fiscal year.
Right. So this is not that. This is the recalculation based on the recalibration, the reset of the market valuation to the actuarial valuation. This particular resolution, right? We're talking about two different things right now.
Well, these calculations are based off of the package that was adopted by the board in January, which does encompass everything that we're discussing today, right now.
And then I just want to note for the record that we discussed this in January, and there was a contention in one of the other boards that the process wasn't transparent. And I want to go on record saying I feel like the process has been very transparent.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right.
Concurred.
All right.
Tom, you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
So as a complete layman here, what does this all mean? Right? Because I'll be honest with you, I have kind of no idea what you're talking about. And it would be really good to know what it is I'm actually voting to approve or not.
Okay, so these are the employer contributions that each of the employers within the Board of Education Retirement System is to pay into BERS to fund the pension payouts for the future and current retirees. So on an annual basis, I look at the liabilities and have to determine per state statute, I have to determine what is the contributions that need to be paid into the pension fund so that there will be enough assets to pay out pension benefits down the road.
Okay, so if I'm looking at the right document here, is that the one where like $47,376,294 less was paid into it?
Yeah, so it's not what's less. So the valuation, the data is collected in a certain year, time frame. For this one, it was collected in June 30th, 2019. June 30th does mark the end of our fiscal year. And it was done in June 2019 because, it's regularly evaluations take a few months to complete. We collect the data after the close of the fiscal year 2019. So shortly after June 30th, 19, BERS got to work to collect all the data and to give it to my office around the fall of 2019. So we took a few months to process the valuation, and we completed it in about first quarter of 2020 calendar year. And that was done after that completion was done. It was brought to the board shortly thereafter. So we're talking about a year ago from now. That was called the preliminary contribution because we needed to tell the employers how much to start contributing into the pension fund for fiscal year 21, which started July 1st of last year, and it's ending June 30th this year. So before the start of the fiscal year, the employers need to start, they need to be communicated to tell them what do we put into the pension fund. And so that's why it's called the preliminary back then. So a lot can happen between preliminary and final, such as, we get new data or there's changes to plan provisions based on the state legislature's you know, all the bills, for example, that was talked about beginning of this board meeting that's put in front of the legislature, if they pass it, for example, that's going to affect the liabilities. As well as, you know, in this case, I recalibrated the actuarial assumptions and methods to make sure that the funding is more tight and is reflective of the economic times that we're in and the demographics of the plan. So before the close of a fiscal year, that's why we're in fiscal year 21 right now, that closes next month. Before the close of the fiscal year, you have to basically true up and have issue final contributions. So this is what this is. This is a final version of the fiscal year 21 pension contributions. And, you know, as Russ said, next after this, we're going to be talking about the preliminary contributions for next fiscal year. So when it talks about, you know, the $47.4 million less, it's $47.7 million less than what was communicated for the preliminary 21. This is a final 21. And part of that change of why it is less is because the asset values increased due to some of the, you know, recalibration that I talked about for the methodology of calculating the asset values. And because the asset values increased, that makes us in a better funded position. And because we're in a better funded position, that's why the employer contribution doesn't need to be as high. So I don't know if I confused everybody, clarified it, or not.
No, I want to. So let me see if I understand this right. Okay, so uh, so kind of like the original number that was communicated out was something higher than the 182 million, right?
Correct.
And then after you did all of your work, right, and made all the numbers match up and stuff, right? What you ended up with was the 182.9 million, right? Which is roughly 50 million less than the number you had originally given them as the number to contribute.
Right.
Right. And the reason why it's less is because of the way that things performed and all of I just want like am I kind of on the right track here?
Yes, you
so
are.
what happens is you give a number, they make contributions, then you kind of do your work to make sure that everything matches up, and then at the end it's like, okay, what you actually need to do is more or less, and in this case it was $47.3 million less.
Correct.
Okay.
And yes, you're absolutely correct. And I just want to state for the record that having preliminary and final contributions is a regular occurrence for every fiscal year. This is not a unique fiscal year. This happens every fiscal year.
Right. Okay. So no, I'm good now. So now that I understand exactly what we're looking at, I'm okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Tom, and you know, rest assured that I'm sure you're not the only person who benefited from that explanation.
Say that last year the Office of the Actuary did an amazing 8-hour training on all of this, and it required all 8 hours of very careful concentration to even get to the point where we can feel somewhat comfortable with it. So do not feel badly.
We may be getting ready to do that again, Sherry, so we may be calling on you.
Well, I think I'm actually kind of happy that I was able to hear all of that and in like a minute or two kind of get the gist of it. So
That's just the surface. That's just the surface.
All right. Thanks. I appreciate it.
And to put it in perspective, even though it was an 8-hour training, it took me 18 years to get my certification. So my actuarial certification.
Thank you, Sherry. Any other questions from the board for the chief actuary before we vote on this item? Hearing none, let's do so. All in favor of calendar item number 22, please indicate your approval. Aye.
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 Any opposed or any abstentions? The motion carries. The next item on our agenda is calendar item number 23, adoption of the actuary's determination for the preliminary fiscal year 22 employer contribution to the New York City Board of Education retirement system. May I have a motion to consider? Thank you, Tom. May I have a second? Thank you, Deb. Sherry, can you please quickly tell us about this resolution?
Certainly. I will pull it up once again, so everybody has it in front of them. So again,
is this is the other half now, right?
yes. So in real time, just taking a step back in real time, we are almost beginning fiscal year 22. So fiscal year 22 spans from July 1st of this year, 2021, to June 30th, 2022, which is next year. So before the fiscal year starts, again, we need to communicate to the employers to let them know how much to contribute into BERS. So this is called the preliminary employer contribution. A year from now, roughly, I'll be bringing forth to this board once again the final contributions for 2022. So that's what's analogous with what we just looked at. So preliminarily, the contributions are determined to be 220.7 million approximately. This does represent a $9.7 million decrease from the preliminary 21 contributions, which during the preparation of this letter was the most recent set of contributions adopted by this board. So that's why it's pegged to the preliminary 2021 contribution.
Thank you,
All
Sherry.
right. So, yeah, I got a question. So preliminary wise, right? Why are we asking for? Could you put that document back up? Because
Yes,
I'm trying
sure
to
thing,
pull
sure
it up
thing.
here.
Sure thing.
Thank you. All right. So, the preliminary number here, it's like 9.6 million less, right?
Right.
So, could you explain why, like, the employer contribution is what you're asking, or the preliminary number is 9.6 million less?
Yes. So that has to do with part of the calibration of the assumptions and methods that I talked about that was presented to the board in January. So part of that package included changes to the assumptions and methods in many different regards, but part of it was smoothing in the actual value of assets to equal the market value of assets. So just taking a step back of what that really means, smooth assets or actual value of assets, they're the same thing, you can be used interchangeably, means that basically we don't take the market value as is on paper that the comptroller's office gives us. And the reason for that, reason why we don't do that, is because there's a lot of fluctuation that can occur on a year-to-year basis in the market value of assets. Stocks can perform really well, or stocks can drop dramatically in as less as 2 weeks if a pandemic is announced, for example. Real estate values can change, and everything that's underlying the portfolio. So because it's so volatile, we don't, as actuaries, we don't want to, just take the market value of assets. What we do is we smooth it in the sense that if there is gain in the actual value of assets, we only take a portion of that gain in the current year, and we save the rest of the gain to be recognized later. Same thing with losses. We don't ever want to shock, the pension plan or the pension plan sponsor. If the assets drop dramatically, we don't want to recognize all the loss in 1 year. We do just recognize a portion of it, and we phase in the losses in a future time. So what's happened is that in the past, we've had a lot of gains in our asset portfolio. And because, like I explained, we only are catching up a little bit at a time, the actuarial value of assets is actually trailing the market value of assets. So part of the recommendation process is so that the actual value of assets doesn't deviate too far from the market value of assets. One of the recommendations within that package was to reset the actual value of assets to equal the market value of assets. So you can, take that take that gain that you've been saving into consideration and start fresh. So because we're seeing this gain, that's why in the asset values, that's why you're seeing these newly determined contributions to be lower than what it was in the past. And the reason for that is because, you know, again, if you're marking your assets upwards, then you're in a better funded position. And so you need to put less pension contributions into the plan.
Okay, so if I just want, and I'm doing this because I just want to make sure I'm understanding, right? So there's this whole smoothing process. So there's the actual value of things versus sort of the value on paper, right?
Yeah.
And what you're doing is kind of reconciling those so that, you know, typically you would do it over time, right? But what's happening is things are kind of caught up in such a way where things are actually worth more, right? So because they're worth more, you have to you don't need to contribute as much. Am I kind of in the right place there?
Yes, you are absolutely
Okay.
correct in that explanation.
All right, cool. Thanks. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And Sherry, was a 4 billion? Was that the number? 4 billion was the
markup
yeah.
for the BERS. I do think it was within that range.
Oh no, I thought for all the systems it was 4 billion. Do you recall? Does anybody recall what the BERS markup was? Because of Antonio and his team's wonderful work.
I can look that up if you. I
just
can get
wanted
back
to
to you, email it to you, or I can
yeah,
look that
that
up.
would be fine. I just wanted to remind people of that the magnitude of it was pretty significant.
Right. And again, that's, you know, we're marking it to the market value of assets. So this, this billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar markup is not just, on paper, or is not made up, or is not pulled out of thin air. It actually is how much assets BERS has on hand, according to, the market value.
Yeah, I didn't want to oversimplify that, right? But what's happening in again, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were phasing it in such a way, right, where there wouldn't be a shock one way or another. But what's happening is that where you are right now is that sort of smoothing process is actually kind of caught up with the actual market value of something. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
And the losses are supposed to outweigh the gains. So, the smoothing, why it's called smoothing, is because, some of the gains that you save for later and some of the losses that you have that has incurred is supposed to wash each other out. But because the market has done so well, it's actually gotten further and further away from each other, those two values.
Right.
So
the gains, right. So the gains kind of outweigh the losses.
Right.
Okay.
And that's why you have that asset gain. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions for the actuary on this calendar item? Hearing none, thank you. Sherry, we will now vote on this item. All those in favor of calendar item number 23, please indicate your approval now. Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Next item on our agenda is calendar item number 24, adoption of the actuary's fiscal 2020 reimbursement calculation resulting from Chapter 41 of the laws of 2016. I have a motion to consider. Thank you, John. Second, Tom. Sherry, can you please tell us about this resolution?
Certainly. Again, I'm going to share a document. So just to begin, Chapter 41 of the laws of 2016 was a law that was passed that allowed members to buy up to 3 years of military service to be used towards their pension benefit. This law, said that the military service could have been performed anywhere. There were previous laws that allowed members to purchase military service, but those were limited to specific timeframes and specific geographic areas of the world that they were serving in. So this just opened it up to any military service that was performed. So when a member purchases service, they pay for a portion of it, and then the city is supposed to pay for a portion of it. But the portion that the city pays for it the state, under state law, the state is supposed to reimburse the city back. So this process is for me to calculate how much, service do they buy, how much service do the members buy, how much do they pay in, and therefore how much the city had paid in, so that they as in the city can go to the state to ask for this to be reimbursed back into the pension fund. So this past year, you'll see in the middle of this chart, middle of this page, there's a chart that says that there were 12 purchases, so 12 members purchase service to be bought back to be used towards their pension benefit. These 12 members in total purchased 30 years. And keep in mind that they're each limited to only up to 3 years. So in total, these 12 members bought 30 years of service. The total cost to BERS liabilities was 421 thousand. And as I said, the members pay for a portion of this. So from their own contributions, they paid 121 million. Sorry, again, it's 121,000. So if you net that out, that becomes the cost of BERS. So approximately $300,000 was paid by BERS, which, through the city, they made the pension contributions into BERS. So again, this is a resolution to ask that Sandy work with OMB to invoice the state and ask for this money back. I do want to make a point, before turning it back to Russ here, that since this law has passed in 2016, even though the city has asked the state for this reimbursement, the state has yet to pay back the city, to our knowledge. So we did this year incorporate a cumulative amount that the state owes the city on behalf of BERS with interest, and that amount is on the total, you'll see at the bottom of the page, is $2.1 million. It is, if you look at it and ask why it's not simply, the 5 years times 300,000, it's because when this law first came about, there was a lot of backlog of people that weren't able to purchase their service before. So there was this big spike in the first year of people purchasing their service, and therefore the liabilities was increased that year. And since then, it's leveled off a little bit.
Okay, so I have a question. So if the state is, let's say in this particular case, right, the state has to pay back $300,051, right? If they haven't done it, right? So that's just kind of not like we ate that, but it's kind of like it's just on the books where that's money the state owes us that we haven't gotten back, right? So it's just kind of sitting there in the negative column when it should for us be zero.
So I do want to say from BERS perspective, BERS is made whole because the city has been paying its contributions into BERS, which is the previous two items that you guys adopted. So from BERS perspective, they're made whole. But from the city's perspective, because city is one of the entities that pays into BERS, right? The city is not made whole.
Okay.
So the city paid, the contribution that you guys just adopted. The city has been making that contribution, but a portion of that includes this Chapter 41 cost that they should be getting back from the state.
Okay. So when we ask for this $300,051, right? We're making that request for basically the state to pay it back to the city.
Right. So this resolution is being adopted such that it enables Sandy to go now ask the state for it. So the board, adopts it and effectuates the recognition, I guess, of this cost. And then Sandy is going to be like, okay, so the board, recognize this, we need this money back.
Right. And they ask the state, and then the state says, okay, City of New York, here's the $300,051. Now, I just want to make sure I'm understanding if we approve it, what happens, right? Now, what's happened historically is if you look at from when did this first start in 2016, right? So every year, basically Sandy has been saying whatever this $300,051 number is, right? Been saying, hey, state, we need that amount. And the state just hasn't given it back to the city.
Yeah, it's done in concert with OMB, who asks the state comptroller, I believe it is. So I don't want to say it's all on Sandy's onus that he's been doing, he's been,
Well,
on deaf
I'm
ears or something like that.
oversimplifying it because it's a basic process, right? So
Yeah, it should be.
the city contributes this money into BERS for us to be able to do this. We in turn ask the state to pay back the city, and that ain't happening, right? There's a
Right.
complex sort of thing going on, but that's sort of the gist of it.
Right. And there
Okay.
is, there is other, I mean, this is beyond the BERS board, but just FYI, there is other leakage that is going on. And I'm having my staff right now work up a memo that's going to be distributed to OMB and all 5 New York City retirement systems and pension funds to let them know on a cumulative basis how much money the state owes the city. And just it's mind-boggling, but it's about $1 billion with a B.
Yeah.
So this 2.1 million is just a portion of a lot of things that's owed to the city.
Well,
And you'll
yeah,
see that
and
memo in the next few months.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
just thinking, right? Because if this same program applies to, let's say, the police department, for example,
It
where a
does.
lot more folks come from the military, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
2.1 million for us will probably be something like 500 million for them because a lot of them come from the military, right? So I get it.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding just sort of in a very basic way what the process was and how it's either working or not working. So thank
Yeah.
you for the explanation. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'll add there's a large running tab between the state and the city, and it keeps growing.
That is for sure. It's just going up. It's not going down.
Any other questions from the board for the actuary on this calendar item? Hearing none, let's move to a vote. All those in favor of calendar item number 24, please indicate your approval now. Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Next item on our agenda is calendar item number 25, authorization for the rebalancing of funds of the Board of Education Retirement System. May I have a motion to consider? Thank you, John. Second, Tom. Sherry, can you please tell us about this resolution?
Yes, and then I'm going to pull this up again. Okay. So this has to do with rebalancing funds between the QPP fund, the main fund, and the TDA, QPP variable fund, I should say, and the TDA. So by state statute, this has to be rebalanced on an annual basis. And what happens is with the variable funds and with TDA, the assets are kind of commingled, and they need to make sure on the QPP variable side and the TDA side that the assets match the liabilities. If the assets don't match the liabilities in these funds that you see in front of us, it gets supported by the main fund QPP fixed. So what happens here is we did for the QPP, the variable fund, you'll see that the assets exceed the liabilities. So it's overfunded by $704,000 approximately. So this $704,000 needs to move from the QPP variable fund to the main QPP fixed fund. And then for TDA, on a cumulative basis with both the variable and the fixed fund, it is overfunded by approximately $11.8 million. And so again, this $11.8 million needs to move out of TDA into the QPP fixed. And there's a resolution at the end for this too.
Tom, I'm waiting for you to launch into your question, but you're not going.
Oh, I was just giving somebody else some time. So if I understand this one correctly, right, what happens here is that all right, I just want to make sure I heard this correctly, right? So one, if
one is overfunded. The sort of excess from it rolls over into the other, right? Am
Correct.
I?
Yes. Yes.
And there's the QPP one, right? So if the QPP one, well, wait a minute, hang on. If the TDA one is overfunded, then that rolls over into the QPP one, right? And from what, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, because the TDA one was overfunded by so much, what was rolled over from this one into the other one, did that make the other one overfunded as well?
No. So there's actually you can think of this as 4 quadrants, right? There's
Okay.
2 in TDA and 2 in QPP, even though only one is listed. So in both the TDA and the QPP, there's the fixed fund and then there's a variable fund. So in QPP, you only see
Okay.
the variable fund listed because everything else is either balanced by or goes into the fixed fund.
Got you.
So these overfunded actually goes into a 4th quadrant that you don't see in here because that's the supporting fund. So if these were underfunded, for example, that's where you take money from.
Got you. From the supporting fund.
Right.
Okay. Got you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions from the board on this topic? Hearing none. I'm going to motion that we move to vote on this one as well. This is calendar item number 25. All those in favor, please indicate your approval now.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Last item on our agenda is calendar item number 26, adoption of the actuary's recommendation regarding tier 3, 4, and 6 loan insurance premium rate for fiscal year 22. I have a motion to consider. Thank you, John. Second, Natalie. Thank you both. Sherry, can you please tell us about this final resolution?
Sure thing. Okay. So this has to do with the loan insurance, as Russ said. So members can take a loan on their own employee contributions. So when they do that, they have to pay an interest rate in return for borrowing the money, even though it's their own money. And on top of the interest rate that they pay, that is used to calculate their repayments, there's also a loan premium rate. The loan premium rate you see on the top chart historically and currently what it is and what it's recommended to be. What this covers is in the event that a member borrows out of their loan and they die before they repay the loan in full, then they still owe money to their balance, right? So if they die and there's a balance that's not paid, and the beneficiary would have to either pay that or take a reduced pension benefit in the amount of the outstanding loan amount. So if they pay for this premium, which is actually required, it's not optional, then if they pass away and their loan is not fully repaid, then this insurance covers that deficit. So this rate is added on top of the loan rate. The loan rate is 6% to borrow. So for example, it's at 0.2% right now. So instead of the interest rate being calculated, the repayments being calculated at the 6% interest rate, is actually calculated at 6.2% interest rate, covering the event that if they die, then their loan is fully repaid. So there's a recommendation this year to keep the loan premium rate at 0.2%. And there's supporting documents, supporting tables and appendixes in this document to support why I'm recommending it to be kept at 0.2%. I can quickly go through that, but before I turn off of this page, you'll see it's trending downward. And the reason is because, I don't think this is a news flash to much people here that, life expectancy in general has been increasing, meaning people are living longer and the probability of someone dying is lower. So if the probability of someone dying is lower, then they don't, in theory, have to pay as much insurance premium for it because it's less of a chance that they actually their beneficiaries would reap the benefit of this insurance. So I'll just quickly go through two supporting documents of why I made the recommendation to keep it at 0.2%. On this chart, which you don't need to fully understand what it is, but it's just mortality rates and mortality rates by age. And I took it to see how many people, the count wise, are eligible for the loan that fall into these age brackets and are applicable to these, to have these mortality rates applicable to them. So, I did some math, and on average, it's expected that it's 0.14% approximately is the rate that someone would pass away. So again, the loan rate is 0.2%, which is very close to that 0.14. The other way to look at this is to look at the balance of what's the insurance fund, basically.
Hey, I'm sorry, before you move to that page, I have a question about the previous one, right? And
Okay.
and I said, because it's like page full of numbers here, right? So these numbers are based on what, right? And the reason why I ask that is because studies have indicated that life expectancy for Black people during COVID has gone down, right? So I would wonder if these numbers all need to be adjusted a little bit because of COVID.
So these actually are adjusted every year. So this column of probability is the same set of probability of mortality probability that we use for our valuations to determine the contributions, the funding contributions that the first two items that I spoke about. So this is calibrated to be as of June 30th, 2020, which is our latest fiscal year close, because June 30th, 2021 has not closed yet. So this does get
2020,
revisited.
you said?
2021 fiscal.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. This table is calculated as of June 30th, 2020, using the rates as of that time. And the reason is because the next fiscal year closed hasn't occurred yet. So June 30th, 2021 obviously has not occurred yet. We're still a month away from that. Meanwhile, we need these rates because they need to be in place. BERS needs to know this for their administrative administration of these pension loans. They need to know this because it's effective as of July 1st this year. So we can't wait till the June 30th, 2021 data. So this is why it's the most recent set of probabilities. And it is calibrated to be specific to BERS and its populations.
Okay, so do you expect these numbers then may change next year in a way because of COVID, right? Because if we go from, let's say, June 2020 to June 2021, right? Then, we all know what happened in between there, right? And these numbers will change.
Right. And there is, if you looked at it, for example, on the bottom, it's 0.14%, whereas the rate that's being recommended is 0.20%. So there is room for fluctuation. Obviously, we do expect fluctuation from time to time, but it is something that we monitor each year to make sure that it's still calibrated. And like I said, a recommendation gets made to the board every year, and it's not necessarily keeping it at the same rate.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So just another way to look at that, I look at the recommendation why I recommend keeping it the same. This is the portfolio balance of, so this $1.8 million that you see where my cursor is, that's the amount that's in the fund right now to pay out these loan balances if a member passes away. You'll see last year that this is the premium. This is a column of premiums collected, and last year, 92,000 approximately was collected in premiums, and 81,000 approximately was paid out to cover members who passed away and their loan balances at that time. This is the rate that BERS earned, and therefore that's the calculation of interest. And so adding all that up, you get the balance, bringing forth the balance from last year from 1.7 million to this year's 1.8 million. You do see that the claims do fluctuate, throughout time. Sometimes you'll have a bad year and sometimes you'll have a better year. And the point of this is you don't ever want this to be depleted but you also don't want it to like grow too much over time too. So with that, with all this analysis in mind, it is recommended that the loan insurance premium rate be kept at 0.2%, which is what this resolution details.
Okay, and I have one last question, right? So if the numbers it sounds to me like the numbers in table number 1 kind of lag, like what's being done in the next year, right? So I'm using numbers from the previous year to determine what I'm going to do in the following year. And it would just seem to me like, because the numbers are 1 year behind in terms of what you use to calculate it, that it could create issues. Would you be able to kind of explain that a little bit? Because like I see it playing out in my head a certain way, but you're an actuary, I'm just a layman. So
I don't think we need the technical spreadsheet or the memo for this explanation, but you are right that it does change from year to year, and that's why there is a retrospective view of it, as you said, and a prospective view on it. The retro view on it, that's why there is different ways to look at this. There's why there's different analysis to do that. In terms of recognizing that this is looking at the past and not the future, mortality is one of those that, because we're working with so many lives within the New York City public servants and the plans that comprise New York City, we get a pretty stable population. That's the effect of the law of large numbers, because it's so large, and deaths, relatively speaking, do not occur that often. It is a pretty stable benchmark that we look at, even though we're not looking into the future, and there is a lag that you say that we look at when we look at the data. To incorporate future improvements, there is what's called the mortality improvement scale that we build into our valuations, that we build into our funding valuations, to take into consideration that, yes, life expectancy is X today, but it might be X plus 2 in the future because of medical improvements, because we're finding we have vaccines, we have new ways of curing things. Hopefully there's a cure of cancer around the corner one day, and all this stuff. Better hygiene and better nutrition, and through various things through time, and that does get built into the valuation.
Sherry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, Madam Actuary, but I'm seeing a message from Deb about leaving to go to another meeting, and I believe that will do it for our quorum. Deb, are you still here, or have we lost quorum fully?
I'm here.
And thank you, Deputy Chancellor Austin. Good evening, Queens.
But I'm leaving soon, so.
Yes, I can hear your other meeting as well. So I don't want to cut off the discussion on this topic, but I do want to be cognizant of the ability for this board to do business. Tom, do you feel comfortable voting for this initiative or for this calendar item?
I do.
Excellent. Sherry, I do appreciate the additional context, and big supporter of the actuarial sciences, but I will move us quickly to a vote on this final calendar item. All those in favor of calendar item 26, please indicate your approval. Aye.
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 Thank you and your teams for all.
Any opposed or any abstentions?
Thank all of the Queen's parent leaders.
That motion carries. That will conclude the agenda for this meeting. The next meeting of the BERS Board of Trustees is scheduled for Thursday, June 24th. I have a motion to adjourn.
Russ,
yes,
say
Antonio.
one thing really quickly. I know we won't take time. This is the last meeting for Evelise Vargas, board meeting for her. She'll be departing BERS at the beginning of next month for a great opportunity. I just wanted to say my thanks to her for helping to form the team. I know it's been a late discussion, but I think she's been integral to the investment strategy team over the past 2 years, and wanted to say my thanks to you on behalf of the entire team and the and BERS. Thank you.
Congrats, Ev.
Thank you, Congrats. I knew you would move on, but congratulations.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. It's been so
You'll be
great.
missed.
And yes, appreciate y'all. And we'll be in touch. Hope to see everyone. And I'll circulate my contact information so everyone can stay in touch.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Everleaf. Congratulations. So sorry you're losing a key member of your team there, Antonio. Big shoes to fill. But you got a good bench on your team right now as well. Everleaf, it's been a pleasure working with you over the last 2 years. All right, with that, motion to adjourn. I saw John, 2 hands raised very high. Michael Wright, I don't believe you're allowed to officially make a motion to adjourn. Natalie, I'll take you for the second. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please indicate your approval. Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, folks.
Any opposed?
Meeting.
Any abstentions? The motion carries. Good evening, everyone. We are adjourned.
Yep, great meeting. Thanks, y'all.
Night, everyone.
Take care and stay
Bye
safe,
now.
everyone.
Good night, everyone.